Good morning. Welcome to Taco Tuesday Potluck Edition for January of 2020. We're very excited to be moving into the new year with our Taco Tuesday sessions. As a reminder, the Taco Tuesday Potluck Editions are more of a conversation, an opportunity for members to chat, discuss, share information, ask questions about a topic that's important to our members. So today's session is going to be about accessibility of resources that libraries provide for their patrons. Our hope is that folks have come to the session ready to talk a little bit about a tool or a resource that they're using that they're happy with, or to come to the group with a question or a challenge that they may be facing in making the library resources accessible to all users. As a component of today's session, we have invited Meghan from Recorded Books to talk to us a little bit about some of the resources that her company provides, which are very well regarded for their focus on accessibility. So we're going to start today's session off by having Meghan show us a little bit about that. And then when she has finished, we will move into having more of the conversation that I talked about earlier. So think about questions you might have or ideas that you might want to share with your colleagues to make everybody's experience a little bit better. So let me take us to, I think I've got another slide. Here's a little agenda, which would have been good for me to put up while I was describing what we were going to do. And then I think we're ready to go over to Meghan. Meghan, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Are you able to hear me now?
Yep, you sound great. I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter, and then the
Wonderful.
ball will be in your court. And there we go.
Excellent. Okay, I'm just going to give that a minute, just making sure that everyone can see my screen.
We do see your screen. Looks good.
Excellent. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. This is my first Taco Tuesday. For those of you who haven't heard from me before, my name is Meghan Haddad-Null, and I work for Recorded Books, RB Digital. So RB Digital is our digital platform that we provide to libraries, and we do have over 15 different content types available through that platform that libraries can subscribe to. My primary focus as a rep is public libraries. So, and I know some of you may work for school or academic libraries, and that's absolutely wonderful. You would just be connecting with another rep, and I can, I would be happy to share that person's information with you if you do happen to work for a library that's not just a public library. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about the background of what we did with adding more accessibility functionality to our platform, why we chose to do that, and then what it is exactly that we did, and then I will go ahead and show you a demo of the product so that you can see specifically how a patron who needed to use that functionality could access it through our platform. So I'm just going to scroll down. This is not a PowerPoint, it's just a PDF, but you'll see the slides nonetheless, so I can talk through this. And you may notice that this is a little bit older, this presentation. It says we expect to release the first phase of accessibility features in early August. The accessibility features have been released. They were released in August of last year, 2019. So, so everything that I'm going through today is currently available through the RB Digital app. And so what we really wanted to do is to expand the base of patrons who could access RB Digital or our digital platform. And so in order to do that, we needed to partner up with a company. The company's name is AudioEye, and they helped us to develop this functionality. So they are expert in this particular area. They have worked with many other companies who needed to implement the accessibility features. And what we're working toward is becoming completely compliant with all of the worldwide content accessibility guidelines. So that's what WCAG stands for. And there are basically two different standards, 2.0 and 2.1. Right now we are fully compliant with the 2.0 standard, and we are working toward being compliant with 2.1. So it's just basically a way for us to measure how compliant we are with the worldwide guidelines for accessibility. And I have to say, we're very proud of this because we are the industry leader at this point in time for libraries in providing digital access. So this is a little bit more of a technical background, but I'm going to go ahead and move into how this affects you and your patrons. So as I mentioned, we do have an exclusive partnership with AudioEye, and one of the great things about this accessibility toolbar is that it's integrated with a lot of the screen readers that patrons may currently be using with their devices. So you can see here, there are a few mentioned: VoiceOver, TalkBack, JAWS, NVDA, Windows Narrator. So all of those existing applications are integrated with our accessibility toolbar. And what that means is that your patrons don't have to switch over to a new application in order to use RB Digital. They can continue to use their current app, their current settings, and it will work within this framework. Some of the functions that we had to address are the screen reader. So as I mentioned, it's basically a voice narration of what is on the screen. And I'll do a demonstration a little bit later so you can see and hear what that looks like and sounds like. And then of course, we do have some contrast functionality, so you can change the contrast, you can change the text size, fonts, and this really helps to support not only people who potentially have low vision, but also people who have dyslexia, who have color blindness. So it really helps to support different types of needs. The audio player, as I mentioned, that reads the screen aloud. You can access a site menu, which just simplifies the menu. There is a page elements menu, which also helps to simplify navigation. And settings, so users can customize their own experience with the accessibility toolbar. And this is a little snapshot of what it looks like. When we get to the demonstration, you'll see this little black bar pops up on the screen, and this is the actual toolbar. This is what it looks like. This is just an example of what zoom, font, and contrast settings can look like depending on what a patron may need. So this is in a dyslexia font with a different contrast setting. Now, for those patrons who don't require this additional layer, this particular interface may not look super attractive, but it is very important. It's a very good function to have and necessary for us in order to be compliant with what was set forth by the worldwide guidelines for accessibility. This is just a little snapshot of what the screen reader looks like. And again, this will make a lot more sense once I go into the demo. So this is where a patron could access the screen reader. It's all here in this right-hand panel. This is in the toolbar as well, and it does demonstrate our certification through AudioEye. So it's just a way for us to prove to libraries and to patrons that we actually have achieved this level of certification, this level of compliance with the guidelines. And then one of the things that I think is really, really helpful too is that we offer a help desk. And so the people who are working the help desk are expert in this subject matter. And so what that means is that a patron, if they're uncertain about what settings they need to use, or if they have feedback, if they just have a question, they can submit this form directly to AudioEye, and someone at the help desk will get in touch with them to help them make sure that they have their settings set up correctly. And it's very easy to access that as well. So I'm going to jump over to the demo so that you can see what the platform looks like, and then also how to access the accessibility toolbar. First and foremost, I do need to mention that right now, as of today, the accessibility toolbar is integrated within the web app. So the web app being when you access RB Digital through the browser, and then the mobile web. So if you're using a mobile device and you're using a browser, you'll be able to get access to the accessibility toolbar. If you're using the RB Digital mobile app, whether it's through an iPhone or through another device, we are not currently able to offer the accessibility functionality. So if a patron is confused and they're saying, well, I thought I could get access to this, make sure that they're using it through a browser. We are aiming to have it launched in the mobile app as well. However, at this time, it just simply is not available. It's just going to require an additional development effort, and we haven't completed that yet. So when you come into the app, I'm already signed in, but when you go through the sign in and registration process, this is what you'll see. And then there's this little blue circle with a white person inside of it, a white stick figure, and that's where you can access the accessibility toolbar. All you have to do is click on it, and then it opens the toolbar up here. And I'm just going to do the demonstration from the top down so that you can see what functions are available. So simply, if you just want to look at the site menu and that's something that you need in order to simplify your navigation process, you can just click on Site Menu. It will take you to this very basic high contrast menu where you can navigate through the functions available in the app, in the platform. You can find anything you need. You can navigate to specific places on the site. Click on Contact Us, and it's actually going to take you to the non-high contrast page, but basically it's just to support navigation. I'm going to come down here and click on the Page Elements menu. So this helps a patron also in navigation because it just sort of helps them say, okay, well, these are the different areas that I need to access on this particular page, and you can navigate through the different headings by using these forward and back buttons. Now, I'm using my mouse, but you can also use a keyboard, and oftentimes with a person who requires a little bit of additional accessibility support, they would be using the keyboard rather than their mouse. And you can simply close here. You can also click on the menu item again if you don't want to use the X to close. This is where you can set your settings. So similar to what you would see on any settings menu, you can set player settings, and it will refresh the page when you click on it, just something to be aware of. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that again, click player settings, and this is where you can start to set some settings with the narration, the player. And then persist settings is if you want to maintain the same settings across all AudioEye enabled sites. This is really helpful for somebody who goes through the process of setting up settings and they want to have to do it once and set it. So you can just turn that on, and then every time a patron accesses any site that's enabled by AudioEye, those settings would be applied across all of those different sites. And then of course, this is where they can access help. Just gives a little bit of background, and then they can also access the help desk here. All right, so that's some basic navigation on this. And then down here, this is where you can actually start getting into the particular settings that a patron may need. So in order to access the visual toolkit, you simply click on it. You can also press T. So it does give keyboard controls as well, which is very critically important for people with low vision specifically. And then I'm just going to go across here. So this will bring up the big cursor. So you can see it just enlarges the cursor here. So a patron can do that if necessary. You can get a reading guide, which will follow your cursor, just sort of helps to maintain that line of sight. Emphasize is going to bring up a highlight banner, so something similar, again, to just help the patron really focus on the area where the mouse is moving. And this is where you can start to change the contrast settings. And you can see I'm just going to click over and over again, and different contrast settings will be applied as I click through the different options. Again, you can press C in order to access this function. You can set the keyboard focus, press Z. You can set highlight links. And as you see, as I click through here, it's highlighting different options. And then you can also change the text size, which is, I'm sure, going to be very extremely helpful for many patrons. I think particularly in libraries where a large print collection is highly used, this is something that we really need to see available in digital as well. So not only is it available through the actual content, so if you check out an ebook, you can change the text size, but also it needs to be available through the app so that people who need to enlarge the text can also do that in order to get to the book that they are looking for. And then you can change the text spacing as well. Again, same thing, they give you text, they give you keyboard and mouse functionality depending on the specific function that you need to access. And then here is where you change the font depending on whether or not you need a different font in order to be able to read. There is a dyslexic font available there as well. Animations can be disabled, alternate text can be set, and then you can, or I'm sorry, made visible, so displayed, and then you can also reset completely and start from the beginning if you need to reset your settings. Once again, in order to access this or turn it off, you can press T or just simply click on the menu item. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to attempt to get this to play for you. I might need to change my okay. And Jeff, are you able to hear that reader that I just turned on? I can hear it, but I just want to make sure that others are
Yeah,
able to hear.
I don't think it's coming through the, yeah, we can't hear it.
Let me try something. Try to change my speakers.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's picking up.
Doesn't. Okay, so I apologize about that. I think it's something with the settings on my audio for the GoToMeeting, but it is reading the menu items. So it says, welcome Megan, recorded books, RB Digital. So it's starting to read these links and these items to me out loud. And I can also change the speed, speed it up, slow it down. I can pause, I can move to the next menu item, and I can do all of these things either with my mouse or with my keyboard. So I apologize that you're not able to hear the reader, but I can send you a link to our service trial. So if any of you are interested in accessing it and testing out the functionality, you'll be able to see and hear all of the different things that this is capable of. I hope that would be helpful. So yeah, I apologize. I think, like I said, I think it's just a setting on my speakers for this particular presentation.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure it's just something with the way GoToMeeting is interfacing with your computer and the site. I wouldn't worry about it, but we'll be happy to share that link out when we share the recording of the video.
Absolutely. And I can send also the slides just so if people are interested in learning a little bit more about the documentation that they can look through that as well. This is another spot right here where patrons can access the help desk in the menu. Again, press H or just simply click on this, and then you can fill out this form and submit it directly to AudioEye. And then, of course, this is where we have our certification. So you can actually see if you are interested in going through specifically what we have developed in order to become compliant, you can do that there as well. This takes you to the AudioEye website. So if a patron, needs additional support or has specific questions, that link at the bottom will take them to the AudioEye website. And then, of course, if they want to quit the AudioEye toolbar, they can simply just press escape or just X. And that's that. So that basically takes us through the background and the demo of the accessibility functionality with RB Digital. And again, it's something that we continue to develop. In fact, yesterday I was on a webinar where the development team mentioned that they have a handful of new functions that will be launched within the next 6 weeks or so. I know that we're going to learn a little bit more about those specifics in a couple of weeks. So if you're interested, please feel free to contact me and I can share more about that with you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Megan.
Wonderful. I'll go ahead and turn the screen back over to you. And then, of course, if anyone has any specific questions, I would be happy to answer those or, take suggestions.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that as well. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to ask Megan while we have her here? For my part, I'll say that was really impressive. I'd like to. I'd like it if more vendors had that kind of really high level accessibility functionality in all their kind of sites and products. So thanks so much for sharing that with us, Megan. Anybody who wants to jump in and speak to Megan or ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself or put something in chat. Megan, I'm not sure if you can see the chat window, but a question has come in. It asks, Roxanne asks, does AudioEye work with other library vendors? Just curious what you mean about an exclusive partnership.
That's a great question. And yes, I was able to see that in the chat. So thank you, Roxanne, for that question. So we do currently have an exclusive partnership with AudioEye, and based on the information that we were given in the beginning, we were told that the exclusivity would last for a year. And so I think at this point, if that's still true, that the exclusivity is coming up on its first year. As of right now, I don't believe that other vendors have worked with AudioEye. As I mentioned, it was exclusive for that year, but I think in the near future, they may have the opportunity to work with AudioEye. And certainly there are other companies out there similar to AudioEye who would be able to support this type of development effort. We really did, I have to say, pride ourselves on being kind of the first in the library space to provide this level and depth of accessibility functionality.
Thanks, Megan. This is Roxanne. It's just easier to talk. I appreciate your demonstration, and I'm learning a lot. I've been behind on a lot of this stuff, but the reason I ask about exclusivity is because while that might be a great selling point for you with RB Digital, I think the real goal is to make electronic resources and all things accessible to everybody. So I would push back a little bit on maybe tooting your horn about the exclusive partnership, because I mean, and I realize there's other companies that can work, with library vendors, but to me, the goal is to make all resources available to all users, and exclusive partnerships seem limiting to that goal.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, and I get it. I am also a librarian, so for me, this is something that, as I said, working for RB Digital and recorded books, I am very proud of it. I think that it's something that's needed in the library world, and I do sincerely hope that because we have done this, that other vendors will also invest the time and resources necessary to create toolbars similar to this in their digital resources.
Sure, thank you. I don't mean to diminish what RV Digital is doing. I appreciate that, and I have the same hope that other library vendors will follow suit. So thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. Any other questions or suggestions? I mean, I do think that there have been accessibility functions out there in the marketplace for some time, but I think just taking it to this next level of making sure that we're fully compliant with the worldwide guidelines is pretty critical, not only in terms of just our company as an example of that, but also because the worldwide guidelines are set forth by WC3. So I know that libraries are very much in tune with that and aware that it's needed and important.
I have another question, Megan.
Yes.
What questions do librarians often ask you, or what do you expect to be asked about accessibility?
I would say that more so than anything, usually when I have these discussions with libraries, there's a particular patron or patrons that come to mind. And so we end up discussing the specific needs of specific patrons in the library community, which for me is fun because unfortunately I don't have direct patron communication anymore. But so that is usually the question that I get, okay, so how do I help this specific patron with their specific needs? And with people who do need additional support accessing digital content, usually it's a very specific need that each individual has. And so that's why I kind of hammered on about the help desk portion of it, because the people who man the help desk really are there to help each individual set up the settings to their specific needs, rather than just giving sort of a generic setup, because that wouldn't necessarily be very helpful. I don't know if that, I mean, I know that that's sort of a difficult, I don't know that that answered your question, but I think generally that it's more about a specific patron or more about the specific instance that people need to discuss.
Sure, thank you. I guess, do you, I guess I was kind of thinking from an acquisition standpoint, like if we're looking at a product, or we've had some reason to kind of review our products for accessibility features, and we want to do some advocacy with vendors to say, what do you have, what standard are you at, what are you planning to do, or, as part of the pitch for a product, what should we expect and what should we ask the vendor where they're at?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, just understanding what the levels of compliance are is very helpful. So as we talk about the standard of WCAG 2.0 and WCAG 2.1, I would look to see that they're at least moving in the direction of being compliant with the 2.0 standard, because that gives you just a baseline level of functionality and accessibility. The narration and the text functionality is also really important, and also making sure, really understanding what devices are compatible is important as well, because as there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of devices that people use, and so having a clear understanding of what it specifically means that we are accessible. As I mentioned, you can't just go and download the app from the Apple iTunes store and get access to this accessibility functionality. Currently it has to be through a browser. So I think those types of questions are helpful to really understanding how patrons will get access to the features once they've gotten into the app or gotten into the platform.
Thank you. I have one more question, and I hope I'm not monopolizing the questions. I was curious when you were showing the different tools in the toolbar along the bottom. There were also the keyboard shortcuts, like
Yes.
Control C for contrast, and I don't remember the exact, or maybe it was Shift. Are those standard across other platforms or other tools like AudioEye? Or is that just specific to like AudioEye's toolbar?
Those are standard, and so that's part of the reason why we selected AudioEye, because we wanted to apply those standards to our platform, and basically just make it as easy as possible for people who are currently using accessibility features, that they're not going to have to learn something new in order to use our service. They get to use the functions that they've currently been using. And I think also, if you are interested in trying out the service trial, you'll see it is really, really easy, especially with the narration support. It tells you, press the space bar to do this, press K to do this. So you don't, you really only have to press that one key. It's not necessarily a series of keys that you have to press. Sometimes it is, but they tell you what you need to do in order to access certain functions. And I'm sorry that I couldn't share the narration with you, but if you are interested, I would encourage you to try the service trial.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for all the great questions. Do you or anyone else have any other questions that I haven't addressed yet today? Not seeing anything in the chat box. And I'd be happy, Jeff, when you share the recording, if you'd like to share my contact information, just in case people do have questions that come up afterward. I would be happy to continue the conversation via email or set up another webinar for individuals who are interested in learning more.
That sounds great, and I will definitely do that, Megan. Thank you so much for taking the time today. What a great presentation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Okay, well, as I said at the beginning of today's session, the Taco Tuesday Potluck Edition is really all about Will's members sharing with each other. So I don't have other slides or other presentations to give. My hope now is that among the people attending today, folks will be up for sharing your experiences with possibly working with other accessibility tools, or if there are other resources that you have taken advantage of, some successes you've had, or challenges in this area that you want to share with the group and maybe get feedback from your peers. So I'm going to kind of throw open the doors here. Feel free to unmute yourself or type something into the chat, and let's see if we can keep the conversation going a little bit.
This is Roxanne. My only one success to date, as I said, I'm a little bit behind on some of this, is we just started the subscription to the New York Times site license through Will's. And I was using the mobile app and noticed that there was video content that didn't have a transcript or closed captions, but similar to what Megan mentioned, with RB Digital, if you use like the web browser and the desktop version, then there was, I think it was a transcript. And so I just noticed that myself. And the New York Times, unlike some of the other maybe more traditional databases that libraries subscribe to, I think is just as important to advocate to. So I reached out to our rep, our support rep, and asked what their policy was on providing like either closed captions or transcripts. And that's where I learned about the that yes, they do also have that distinction, that the mobile app is not, doesn't have all of those features for accessibility. And so I received a response, and I was grateful for that. They said that it's in the works, and they try to get 100% of their content to be accessible, but that's not always the case. So I guess I'm curious if anyone else has noticed those things and reached out or something.
Hi, everybody. This is Amy from Ripon College. Just first, and again, also late to the game in figuring things out for our users and community. And I haven't had any prior experience. And so I appreciate especially all the questions, Roxanne, that you've had that have pointed out some obvious things that I should be paying attention to. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Roxanne. I think that's important to, I don't know, repeat is the wrong way. It's important to emphasize that we have a lot of power just in terms of asking the question. I'm sure Megan would agree that when the customer says, "Hey, why doesn't this work the way it does?" That a good vendor perks up their ears and responds. So, if we're seeing an increased need for accessibility support from a particular vendor or a particular publisher or on a particular product, I would encourage not only from your own institution to reach out as a customer, but also share that information with us here at Wills, because particularly if it's a Wills vendor, there are probably a lot of other Wills members using the same product or working with the same vendor. And just like everything else we do, we think more voices are better than fewer. So we would like to kind of signal boost those questions or requests for enhancements. We have, not only can you just send something to me or to another member of the Wills staff, but we also, I think all Wills cooperative purchasing members are signed up to one or more of our kind of discussion lists. So you could certainly put questions and information on those lists as well to try and get more people talking about whatever topic it is that you're bumping into.
Jeff, this is Megan, and I'd just like to agree with you. Pretty much everything we do is scheduled and prioritized based on feedback that we get from our customers. So the more that we hear a demand or need for something, the more likely it is that it get kind of moved up the prioritization schedule. And I would say that probably holds true for all of our competitors as well. So it is really important. I mean, I enjoy hearing feedback from libraries, and it just helps me, really share that back with the company and the developers to let them know this is what I'm hearing and this is what we need to do in response.
Thanks, Megan. Does anyone else have anything specific that you are maybe trying to fix or trying to find a solution for that maybe somebody else on the call has come up against?
I have another question. This is Roxanne.
Great.
I guess I'm curious, and Megan, you can answer this too if you're aware of it. I'm curious about putting accessibility language into licenses. I guess one question would be, as you're looking at licenses, do you try to do this? And like, how important is it? And then I know there's always the question of, okay, so it's in the license, but the vendor, how do you hold the vendor accountable or test, the things that they said they were going to do? those are, I don't know, large questions. I definitely haven't solved them. I don't know if the library profession has, but I'm curious if anyone else has maybe tried to include accessibility language in their licenses, or from the vendor side or wills. Like, do you also try and input that in there, or is it just more important that the vendor is working on things and continually improving?
Well, from the Will's perspective, I can say that this, like many of the people on the call, this is a topic that is gaining a lot more traction here at Will's. It's something that we've become more aware of as a need for our members. We don't have a concerted effort right now to include accessibility language in the licenses that we negotiate with vendors. However, the Cooperative Purchasing Advisory Committee, which is sort of a committee of members that help to guide and advise the co-op service here at Will's, is going to be looking at our license kind of requirements for revision in the next year. So that's something that I will make sure to talk to the committee about as well. But that's only an answer to your question about licensing. The other component that I think you mentioned was how do you test that? How do you enforce that? And that's something that not only Will's, but we're hearing from other consortia around the country that's one of the big challenges in this area. Is it can be incredibly time intensive and labor intensive to do a real thorough test or survey of even one database, let alone a whole portfolio of resources that you might offer as a library. So there's been a little bit of talk among library consortia about some sort of collaborative effort between. There are all kinds of library consortia all over the country, Will's just being one. But there's been some very early talk about, could we put together some kind of collaborative effort among us consortia to try and tackle this topic of testing resources to see, are they in compliance with their licenses? Are they even doing what their documentation says that they do from an accessibility standpoint? So it's far too early for me to say that something like that is happening or going to happen, but it's on our radar. And so it's something that we're definitely talking about and exploring, which is one of the kind of my reasons for wanting to have this session today, to hear back from the members about your needs or the kinds of things that you're seeing. Megan, I don't know if you wanted to jump in to address what Roxanne said as well, but feel free if you do.
I actually really like that question, the combination of questions, because I do think it's, critical. And, of course, at this point, we would benefit from being an industry leader. But I also, I like hearing that feedback, because it really helps me, again, just sort of share that with the people that I work with. Okay, if there are library consortia that are getting together to say, listen, these are the things that we expect. This is what we're going to base our assessment on. And in order for you to even qualify, you have to, sort of meet these standards. It changes everything. It changes for us how we develop product and what, like I said, what we prioritize. So, the fact that this is becoming more of a conversation, I think, will trigger some change and additional development.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Julia at Northland.
Hi, Julia. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. I'm like Amy. I don't know, but Northland's really behind the curve on some of this, and I just want to thank Megan especially for demoing possibilities. But we're just beginning to, really address this and think about it. But as a really small institution, with fewer than 3 people working, there's so many day-to-day priorities that we haven't addressed this, except, mostly as one-offs. And if we have students who've had issues, we've been working with the accommodations person, but we haven't just really had time to prioritize this, to give it some concerted attention. I know we need to, and so it's helpful just to hear what's some of the capabilities out there that we haven't really even begun to think about. So we're way behind the 8 ball, but hopeful we can move in a positive direction.
Thank you for sharing, Julia. I think, well, I mean, you can already tell from everybody else on the call that you're not alone in that. There are libraries of all kinds in Wills that are definitely working hard to naturally to make sure everything that they provide to their patrons is available and accessible to all their patrons. So yeah, just like you, it's something that we're increasingly aware of and looking for ways that we can help, at least among kind of the partnerships that we have with them, with vendors and in advocacy on behalf of our members. So it's something that we're exploring too. We're always open to get feedback and especially ideas or suggestions about directions that we might want to go.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the work that you do. Thinking of Roxanne's comments, I mean, we rely on Wills, to do all of our licensing work. We don't have anybody who's qualified to do that. So, so we're in part depending on the work that Wills does. And I know it's on your radar screens too, and doing what you can do. So we're just riding along and hoping for the best.
I think that's true in so many areas that we're riding along and hoping for the best. But I feel like we're heading in a good direction. Even just having this meeting seems like at least it's something, right? We're all at least talking about it and acknowledging that it's an area that we need to be more aware of and involved in.
Yep. Yeah.
This is Roxanne again. Jeff, you mentioned that there were some libraries in the Wills Consortium that were maybe being more proactive or advocates for accessibility with e-resources. Do you have any specific instances that you could highlight for members? Just because I think, it seems like the prevailing opinion is that we're behind and we know this is good and we should be working on this, but I kind of feel like, okay, where do I start? And that's why I'm sort of asking questions like, what should I ask? And what do you do? And those types of things. And if there's any one or several good examples that Wills members are doing, sharing that across the board would, give us all ideas of, oh, yes, I can do that too. And here's my voice. I want to add it to the conversation and give the feedback to vendors or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the first example that really comes to mind for me is I know that at Fox Valley Technical College, and I'm not sure if this is something that they do every time they're evaluating a potential new resource, but I know that there have been several instances where they've been thinking about a new resource that might come through Wills. And as a part of the trial period, everybody here does trials, and part of that is trying to get a sense of how good will the resource be for our programs. Will our patrons, our students and staff and faculty use this resource? But I do know that to some extent they're taking some of that trial period and really trying to drill down into the accessibility functionality as well. I don't have specifics about if there's a particular rubric they're using or particular things that they're testing for, but I do know that I've been involved in a few conversations between library staff and vendor rep about, okay, we did the trial and here's a few accessibility concerns we have. And, I wish I had the email in front of me so that I could describe how that was resolved. but that might be something to consider, is that, making that a component of a trial period. Like, can we look at in real life, like in real time, see how does it meet our expectations in terms of accessibility for our patrons, in addition to looking at the content, looking at the interface, looking at its interplay with your link resolvers and so forth, all the other stuff you do during a trial. Now, of course, everything I've just described means more time, right? But that's at least one example that I can point to, that and I'd be happy to go back to the folks there and maybe see if there is some checklist or rubric that they're working from when they do that. And like I said, I don't know if they're doing that every time they look at a new resource, but I know that they have done it in the past.
It may be related to this. This is Julia again. If I don't know, Fox Valley might have the information, but if there's kind of like a standard, Roxanne said, where do we start? Is there a best practice, kind of how to start assessing resources at your libraries? A standard, like 3 top accessibility sites for libraries or something along those lines, just as a place to get started in a in an organized fashion instead of hit or miss, especially like a best practice or standards in the field type of thing. If anybody knows of a site or institutions that actually have an accessibility department for their institution that might have that.
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know for sure, but if you'll permit me one little plug here, I think is it March? I think in March, we're going to be having one of our Will's World Shorts sessions, and those are kind of short webinar sessions similar to this, but more of a presenter, kind of like you would get at a conference, but virtual. There is a faculty member at Milwaukee School of Engineering who gave a Will's World presentation about web resource accessibility. And so we've asked her to come back and reprise and maybe, give us a little update and also just kind of a revisit of that session in the Will's World short format, which, like I said, I think that's in March, but I'll double check that. And I know that from her live session that she did have some suggestions about the sorts of things you should look at, the sorts of things that you can do to your own website to make sure that it's accessible. But I believe she also has some tips on the sorts of things to look at from, subscribed content as well, to make sure that it is also living up to that. But I'd be delighted to hear from anybody else on the call if anybody has a resource or a checklist that you've worked with as well.
This is Roxanne. I was just doing a little looking as you were talking, Jeff, and I noticed the Big Ten Academic Alliance on their website has, they have a standardized license language that they recommend. And then they also, it looks like there's been some effort to do testing on library vendor platforms. And they list the date that it was tested and then also provide a PDF report. So a lot of the major library vendors are there. Megan, for what it's worth, I don't see RB Digital, and maybe that's because you're more public library focused, but that might, I don't know if they take volunteers or what, but the one thing I don't see is, and maybe I just haven't found it yet, is kind of how they perform the testing or what they're looking for. As Julia said, kind of like, I don't know, a rubric or best practices or where to start. That doesn't appear to be available from the Big Ten, but it looks like they're I guess if you don't have time during your own trial to look at ArtStore and see what accessibility things are, you could at least look at what the Big Ten put together or something.
Roxanne, that's a great find. If it's no trouble, would you mind just dropping the URL into the chat window for everyone?
Yes, I will do that.
Thanks, and I'll include that as well when we send our follow-up message. So everyone who registered to come to today's session will get an email from Wills just pointing you to the link of the recording. But in that email, I'm going to plunk in a few more of these resources that we've been talking about, including this link that Roxanne just put in chat. So those of you on the call live can just go to it, but I'll also include that URL in the follow-up email for those who are listening to the recording. Thank you for doing that. Well, we've just got a couple of minutes left. I can hardly believe that the hour has gone so quickly. I have to confess, every time I do one of these, especially the potluck ones, I always worry, gosh, will anybody talk? But that hasn't been a problem today. I'm really pleased. Thank you all so much for sharing. But as I said, we've got a couple of minutes left. Does anyone have any further thoughts or questions that you want to throw out into the mix before we wrap up for the day?
Hi, this is Nick at CBTC. Just a thought out there for those that don't already know, just along the lines of accessibility and talking about changes that vendors can make. I know EBSCO Discovery Service is actively going into beta testing of their new interface that is, well, it's not really proactive, it's very reactive to a series of complaints that they received from subscribers about lack of accessibility, not only for screen readers, but also just in general. The interface, it was quite cluttered and awful and had all sorts of issues and inconsistencies. And I know that starts going live April of this year with a deadline of the following year to have all of their current subscribers actively migrated over to the new interface.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Nick. I knew that there was a new interface coming. I had forgotten about the what you described there, the kind of accessibility issues as being one of the things that they were going to address with that. So thanks so much for reminding me and for sharing that with the other people on the call.
Yeah, and currently, I mean, really all we do, we maintain like a LibGuide about accessibility, and I revisit it every so often because I am the library's accessibility police, I guess, in a sense, along with Vince. But we have like our diversity department kind of handles that for our college. And then with vendors in general, I mean, we have declined things that, you know, resources that would be wonderful simply because they lack captioning or their interface is awful. Or with EBSCO, I've called them out for sending out product demos that don't have captioning or accessibility features built into, you know, the emails themselves, because it's really kind of barring access for people who could benefit from them if they don't make them accessible in the first place.
That's good to hear. I mean, disappointing that you miss out on some resources that would be valuable to a lot of your patrons, but kudos to you for saying no to something that's not available to or accessible to all of your patrons. I think that's an important aspect of what we're talking about here. I mean, of course, right? Money talks. Everybody wants to make a sale, and if the reason they didn't make that sale is because of some accessibility issue that should be fixable, hopefully that gets the gears turning.
Yeah, and you know, it's a liability if we're not proactively doing that. I mean, that just leaves you as an academic institution wide open for all sorts of legal issues if the content that you're providing for your students or your other patrons isn't accessible in the first place.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's a major equity problem. You need to be able to provide the same level of service to every person at your institution, or like you said, that's a liability and exposure for you as an institution. So beyond just wanting from a place in your heart to provide good resources to everyone, you're required to. And so I think that's an important thing to mention that we haven't talked about yet today. Well, okay. If you can believe it, it's 12:30 already. I will give a wholehearted thank you, not only to Meghan, who took some time to talk to us today, but to everybody who attended. As I said at the beginning of the session, these potluck sharing sessions really only go if people come ready to share, ask questions, and help each other. So it means a great deal to me that you've done that, and I think everybody will agree that it's been a very good conversation. One last little plug. We do have next month our normal kind of Taco Tuesday format where we will have 4 different vendor reps to talk to us about their resources. As of right now, I think we only have 1 signed up, but don't worry, we will have more. We will have a full roster by the time February 4th comes up. So I will say again, thank you all for attending. I hope your new year is off to a great start and continues to be great. And we will talk to you next month on February 4th for another Taco Tuesday.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Meghan.
Thanks, Jeff.